Hey everyone, David Chen here. I just got home from seeing The Matrix Resurrections, and I wanted to share some of my reactions to the movie. This will not contain any spoilers from the movie. I'm not even going to say what the premise of the movie is, because I consider the premise to be a spoiler. But I will talk about some of the stuff that's been seen in the trailers. So if you want to go in completely fresh, then skip this, come back after you've seen the film, or until you no longer care about the premise. Overall, I have to say I was very, very disappointed by this movie. I had moderate expectations, you know. I think my appreciation of the Matrix trilogy, the original three films, has grown over time. And I've actually really grown to like Reloaded, which is a movie I didn't appreciate when I first saw it. And Revolutions has some virtues as well, although it's not my favorite. And so it's really fascinating to be able to have one of the directors of the movies go back to this world and potentially try to reinvent it, add something new, bring some interesting new ideas to the mix. And so I was really looking forward to it. I was very excited. This is one of my most anticipated films of the year. And unfortunately, I just don't know that what was added was interesting enough to kind of justify this movie's existence for me. It felt to me actually like kind of one of the worst types of these reboots, legacy sequels, whatever you want to call them, where there's just tons of referring back to like stuff that happened in the original trilogy to a point that it's like a distraction, to a point where I'm like, okay, is there anything new here other than just like referring back to the old stuff? Let me talk about some of the things I really like about the movie. You have Keanu Reeves and Carrie-Anne Moss returning to these roles. And these people basically aren't human, in my opinion. They are gods because they don't age. Somewhere in some attics, there's like a portrait of Carrie-Anne Moss and or Keanu Reeves getting older and uglier right now. They look amazing, but they also still are able to inhabit these roles, and these are obviously very beloved characters. So it's just cool to see them again in these roles, like just on a very baseline level. I think the newcomers are pretty cool as well. Specifically, Jessica Henwick is awesome, and I actually kind of wish the movie had been about her character. I think that would have been really interesting, or more interesting than what we got here. Yahya Abdul-Mateen II, also solid as always, but I don't think he's given that much to do in this film, unfortunately. The visuals are great. The way that this movie is shot and color graded, I actually really appreciated. I think a lot of us are used to watching Marvel films and other big budget blockbusters, and like many of these movies have kind of, I'm just gonna say like fairly ugly palettes, like color palettes, and by design, I think like there's a reason they all kind of look the same, and it's just not to my taste. And it's great to see a movie like The Matrix Resurrections where like they're using every part of the color palette. You know, every frame kind of feels very vibrant and alive in a way that many other big budget blockbusters don't feel. So I like the look of it. And there are some really genuinely interesting kind of action and sci-fi ideas, ways in which the world of the Matrix is expanded upon in this film that I think would have been genuinely cool if the movie had had more time to explore them. But unfortunately, I think the biggest problem with this film is stakes. It's the understanding of like what the stakes are, like why people are doing what they're doing, and why we as the audience should care. I don't feel like the movie, I should say, does a particularly good job of establishing good stakes. And that is just pretty crushing for a movie like this because, you know, as with other Matrix movies, there are extended action sequences. And in order to really care about what's going on screen, you need to understand what the stakes are. Like, why am I invested in character A getting, you know, from point A to point B? Why am I invested in this outcome being achieved? And I just don't feel like the movie does a very good job of it. It's really unfortunate because, yes, there are some cool visuals or some cool ideas, but ultimately, none of the action scenes really land with any kind of emotional force in a way that we're used to from the other Matrix films. Like, you know, Matrix 1 and 2, and to a lesser extent, Matrix Revolutions, like, they all had incredible action, and some of the action scenes like are very vivid, and like the highway chase sequence in Matrix Reloaded is still an amazing sequence, and just like pure adrenaline. And yes, it's not exactly clear where those characters are going, but they're trying to like get away from this thing. They're trying to get away from those twins that are trying to kill them because they want to survive because they need the keymaker to break into the program, right? Like that, and you understand like why they're trying to do that, because there's these sentinels that are coming to Zion and going to destroy the city. So like it's very clear like what the overall stakes are, and I just feel like in Matrix Resurrections, it's not nearly as clear, and it's deathly to your emotional investment in the film. I think the movie adds very, very little to our concept of Matrix mythology and that world, and like overall, just like when it comes to like the overall narrative. I'm not talking about ideas. Like, let me distinguish what I mean when I say like ideas versus like the narrative, right? Like ideas is like, okay, here's a cool idea. I'm just gonna give you an example from Star Wars, like BB-8. Oh, there's like a little robot that can roll around because its body is spherical, and that's kind of like a cool like idea, right? But so it's a cool visual, it's a cool idea. But it's not like it has any. The fact that he's spherical doesn't necessarily have that much bearing on the plot, right? There's tons of like, or not tons, but there's like a few of those kinds of things in Matrix Resurrections where it's like, oh, that's a cool idea, that's a cool like thing that like, what an interesting way of like reconceptualizing something that we know from the original Matrix films. Like, there's cool stuff like that. I'm not gonna say there's nothing there, but narratively, thematically, I just feel like this movie adds nothing to the original franchise, and arguably takes away. Like I actually think Matrix Revolutions ended in a really interesting way, right? Like if you recall, I'm going to spoil the ending of Matrix Revolutions, but there is this conflict between man and machine, and the bold move that Neo makes in that film is he tries to find some kind of peace between the two of them, and both man and machine kind of head into an uncertain future at the end of Matrix Revolutions. I am not going to say in what state Matrix Resurrections begins in, but I am going to say that there's some movies that, in my opinion, improve on their predecessors. Spider-Man No Way Home being one really good example, in my opinion. Like, it took some of the mistakes and missteps of previous films and made them better, redeemed them in some way. And there's some films that take away from what was there previously. Like, it's subtractive. It's detracting from what was already there. That, good or like, say what you will about the tenets of Matrix Reloaded and Revolutions, but at least it's an ethos. And unfortunately, I don't feel like this movie, Matrix Resurrections, has an ethos. Like, it feels like it's just repeating beats, story-wise, visuals-wise, from the original trilogy in ways that are overall like pretty uninteresting, and that's very disappointing. Like, it just felt like there was probably some potential here, so much potential, to reimagine what the Matrix might look like in the modern world, where everyone uses surveillance, has like surveillance technology on them like at all times, and we willingly submit to it. And like, our relationship with technology is so different than it was back when the first Matrix film came out. And I was hoping for some exploration of that. I was hoping for potentially like revisiting some of the ideas and executions of ideas that happened in Matrix 2 and 3. And I was hoping that like there'd be some core idea that made me understand why Lana Wachowski wanted to return to this franchise. And I don't know if I can find it, I don't know if I could find it. And ultimately, I'm disappointed by that. So, should you go see The Matrix Resurrections, particularly in theaters? One of the other disappointments I would say I have with the movie is the fight scenes are not as good in this movie. There's some decent like action scenes and cool action ideas, but the fight scenes just aren't as memorable as they were in literally any of the original Matrix films. And so the question of whether you should go see this in theaters, I don't know. There's some big enough visuals that like it does reward the theatrical experience, but like the movie left such a not even bad taste, but kind of like a bland taste in my mouth that I feel like, if you're on the fence about it, feels like it would be a decent HBO Max viewing to me. So it kills me to say that. Like I'm in pain as I say that out loud, but this is my honest reaction to the film. So overall, sad to say I was not a fan. Did not really enjoy going back to the world of the Matrix. Some cool visuals, some cool ideas, but otherwise, this was a disappointment for me. All that said, very curious what you think. Let me know in the comments. Thanks so much for watching. I want to give a big shout out to all my patrons who make my work possible at patreon.com/DaveChen. Sign up for exclusive audio and other things there. But thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And I will see you in the next one.